Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. This is episode 3 in the 2 years ago CW series, and 2 years ago on the 17th of June, Chris Watts sent a text to a co-worker, Tony Brown, and the text simply read, "Thanks again for covering this weekend. Last weekend with the kids meant a lot. I owe you one." And I think what Watts was really communicating to Tony Brown, it's a little bit confusing because he says, "Thanks for covering this weekend." Then he says, "Last weekend with the kids meant a lot." What he kind of means here is, thanks for covering this weekend. It's the last weekend that they got to kind of spend with the children. And that's why it would mean a lot. Why was it the last weekend? Because on June the 22nd, so 5 days later, Shanann and her husband traveled to San Diego to attend a Thrive convention. So, and obviously without the children. So they would leave the children, I think in the custody or in the care of Frank. Frank was in Colorado, in Frederick, in the house and kind of looking after the children. And when Shanann returned, then all of them would fly to Aberdeen in North Carolina together. I remember in one of my books, I think I wrote about Frank flying to North Carolina, and someone sort of left a snarky comment saying something like, "You idiot, he lives in Aberdeen, why on earth would he be flying there," or something like that. Well, anyway, that is kind of what happened. So instead of getting a babysitter, one wonders why, they couldn't have just used a babysitter, a local babysitter, or couldn't they have used McKenna Lindstrom? Couldn't they have asked perhaps Nicole Atkinson? Wasn't there anyone else to ask? I mean, think about the cost to fly Frank to Frederick compared to sort of babysitting. In any event, that is what happened. And obviously Tony Brown, helped out Chris Watts. And so Chris Watts thanked him. Again, it's kind of ironic, Chris Watts thanking his co-worker and saying that, spending time with the kids meant a lot. And if we take that at face value and we say it did mean a lot, if we say it was a good weekend together, it would actually be good to look at Shanann's social media, which you can't do anymore, but to look at Shanann's social media and look at what they did that weekend. What did they do on their last weekend? If you think about it, it was the last weekend effectively as a family, although realistically Watts was already sort of into the affair. I mean, this is already 5 days after those emails. So even if Chris Watts was with his family, Kessinger had to be on his mind. In any event, he's still playing the role of dad. He still seems to be quite into his children and into his family. And of course, all of that would change when they got back from San Diego and then Shanann took the children and basically opened the door to the affair unknowingly for 5 long weeks. Just 5 long weeks that Shanann stepped out of the door and Kessinger, metaphorically of course, stepped in. Of course, actually what happened was Watts also stepped out the door and he went and spent almost every single night that Shanann was away. He actually stayed over at Kessinger. And she says in her many statements, she actually made very many statements ultimately to law enforcement, but she actually said that the intimacy sort of started very, very quickly. It happened very shortly after they kind of had a connection. And I think a final thing just to mention here, this is not going to be a very long video, but the final thing to mention is there are a lot of people who just keep going on about, this affair was a lot longer. This is all a much bigger thing than we know. You know, there's some kind of conspiracy going on. Kissinger knew about, you know, she did Google searches months earlier, and all of this was going on for a long time. That's okay to make that case. So you make that case, right? And you've got your Google search, and then what else have you got? What else have you got that sort of shows a... and I don't mean where you say, well, okay, Kissinger deleted that information, or what's deleted it. That's not an argument. You can't say, well, because it's deleted, I can't make my argument. You've got to have something to support your argument that is based on, did an eyewitness see them together? Is it somewhere in their browser history? Is there this? Is there that? Did the GPS data show something? And there's none of that. Instead, what you see is June is quite thin in terms of any, how can I put it, breadcrumbs, let alone any of the other months. The phone data review actually kicks off, besides that Google search in September, it kicks off at the end of May. So you kind of got to ask, well, did the phone data review just not pick up other information going back further? I don't know about you, but often it's harder to delete the older stuff in your phone because it's further back. If you want to delete certain things, often it's the most recent stuff that gets deleted. And in terms of browser stuff, I think it's even harder. In any event, there are only 2 entries in May, and that is, you know, to do with Shanann announcing her pregnancy. This is what the investigators found relevant, and I think it is relevant. And on May 29th, Cassie and Josh were talking about moving to Colorado, and we know that just before the murders, in fact, kind of like the weekend of the murders, Josh was still asking, you know, is it okay if we still move in? And this was going to be very shortly into August, maybe early September. So this is the important part of the phone data review, is June and July, but especially July. July is the crucial month in terms of the Watts case, specifically the affair. July was the month where, for a full month, Shanann and the kids weren't home for that entire month. That whole thing only started, you know, towards sort of the end of June. So it would have taken a little while for Watts to get used to the idea of Shanann and the kids not being around, and also for Kissinger to feel comfortable with this guy literally sleeping over constantly. So we're going to come back to the phone data review in 2 days' time on June 19th. Again, it's a message to Tony Brown. But the thought I want to leave you with is, you know, wasn't this maybe the last genuine moment Watts had with his children, where he still felt love towards them, and where it was sort of, you know, it was a mutual thing where, you know, he was happy being a dad and they loved their dad. And it's kind of an open question. Was it a genuine, authentic moment, or was there already a sense of being with these kids wasn't fun anymore? And it's not really a nice road to go down, but I think the answer is inevitably no, it wasn't actually fun for him to be with either his kids or his wife or his family. And I think that is partly why he started the affair with Kissinger, was he wasn't happy. You know, in those emails they were talking about a beautiful life, and he it seemed to him as well that he was also like her, wanting to build a beautiful life. It wasn't that he had one. He had the appearance of one. He certainly didn't have one. And it was while he was with Kissinger that he said certain things to her about his experiences with his family. I'm not going to repeat them here because I'll probably get shot down for that. But one thing I am going to touch on is what Anthony Brown says in the discovery on page 756 and 757. We'll go back to Anthony Brown on the 19th when we deal with him again. We'll go into him in a little bit more detail. But what he says, Anthony Brown, he says, and I'm quoting from the discovery, Watts made a comment to him about 2 months ago, right? 2 months ago being June, July, August, right? At this time, obviously, Shanann was already pregnant. And he said, in which Brown thought was unusual. Brown said he and Watts were at a location called Arrowhead Farms, and they were in the process of getting the site ready to start pumping oil again. So they were at work and kind of just going through the motions. Brown said Watts had told him that he and Shanann were expecting a baby. Brown said he told Watts congratulations, and Watts said in return, do you want one? Brown said Watts made this comment with no emotion, and Watts didn't appear to be very excited about having another baby. Brown said he thought Watts was offering him their baby. Brown said he thought Watts was kidding, but Brown said after the recent incident surrounding Watts, Brown wondered if Watts was being serious about giving away his baby. And this is a really interesting thing that Brown is bringing up, because it's actually true. I think Watts was kind of being sarcastic or maybe kind of ironic, but he was actually being truthful in basically showing that he wasn't very excited about the child, because he wasn't. I think there was a moment where the idea of it was compelling for him, but I think very quickly after Shanann conceived, Watts was conflicted and unhappy about it. In fact, I think very shortly after those emails, very early in June, I think Watts felt, that's what I want. I don't want this, I want that. And it goes even further, is we know for a fact that Watts said to Shanann, I'm scared to death of having this third child. And I wonder whether the idea didn't occur to Watts, not in a serious way, not in a practical way, not in a realistic way, but maybe in a daydreaming sort of way, maybe in a wishful thinking sort of way, maybe even in a delusional sort of way, where Watts thought, I wonder if we can't give away this child. I wonder if we can't give it up for adoption. I wonder if that's something he wouldn't have maybe put to Shanann if she'd been sort of flexible or receptive to it. I don't think she would have gone for that in a million years, but I think Shanann did say in one of her texts, he would be happy if I aborted. Okay, so that's actually on August the 8th, the day Watts returned to work in August, after they'd come back from North Carolina, the day after. And what Shanann said to Sarah Nudd right then, she said, we are supposed to go to an ultrasound tonight, and he doesn't want the baby. He'd abort if I said it was okay. So if you just think about that, where Watts says, to Anthony Brown on the 17th, 2 years ago today, thanks for looking after, thanks for taking care of the work stuff. Being with the family meant a lot. Obviously, if he's feeling this conflict about the pregnancy, it's not really meaning that much. It's something that probably meant a lot to Shanann and something that was required. But did he really want to be in that situation? And obviously, at this stage already, he's communicated to Brown actually that he wants to actually give away one of his children or get rid of one of his children, which ultimately was the first criminal impulse that Watts actually acted on, was that he apparently tried to bring about a miscarriage in Shanann, which would have potentially killed the child, the unborn child. And if it succeeded in that, the question is, would anyone have been murdered after that? Would it have been necessary in Watts's mind to carry out any of the other crimes? Just from a criminal psychology perspective, it's an interesting question. In other words, was the big issue for Watts this unborn child? Remember, it was something Kissinger said she wanted to give Watts. I want to give you a son. So was this really the issue in Watts's mind, this child? Anyway, obviously also related to the finances. And then there's another thing I want to highlight, and it's where Brown said, now that he's had a chance to think about the situation, this is on page 757 of the Discovery, he thinks Watts may have been dating a girl in the Anadarko office. It sounded like he's quite unsure. I think maybe Watts may have been dating someone in the Anadarko office. Well, who was it? Brown said he thought Watts was dating a girl named Nikki. So he doesn't give her surname. So he knows her by her first name. Brown said he saw Watts and Nikki standing near the break room talking together. Brown said he thought Watts and Nikki were standing extremely close, and Brown thought that was unusual. Brown thought that happened about 5 months ago. So 5 months ago would have been basically April. And so the question is, if that did happen 5 months earlier, does that mean something was already happening then, or does it mean chemical reactions were starting then? Was there kind of a long period of flirting and kind of infatuation leading to sort of lustful feelings or whatever? Bear in mind, Watts is an introvert, and also bear in mind he doesn't really have much game with women, but maybe he had some time to develop, first of all, him to develop feelings for her, and second of all, for her to notice him and become kind of interested in him. And also bear in mind that kind of makes sense that there'd be almost a non-romantic relationship, almost like a friendship building, and by the time Shanann left, it was at such a fever pitch level that it was like flicking a switch, and then it could transition instantly from lukewarm to white hot fire, if that makes sense. I'm just saying that's a scenario that would fit in with the timeline. What do you think about that? So we'll resume on the 19th of June, 2 years ago today, CW, and I'll see you guys then.